going. Here we go. Yep, that's what's going on right now. Hooray. Okay, we're on 4 for 4 right now. Hey, greetings and welcome to another episode of Treasure Quest Snake Island, the real story, but it's also going to be the transition episode for the new channel, which is 1776 Reboot. So I'd like you to go over to 1776 Reboot, and that's where you will get us. And today I have with me Brian Morris, retired Army Special Forces. And Brian, I'll let you do an introduction of yourself quickly as to a little bit of your background and what we're going to be talking about on this episode.
Hey everybody, how you doing? This is Brian. A bit about me. I'm just a retired Army guy. Spent a little over 25 years active duty. Most of my time in the Special Forces. My area of operation was generally Africa and the Middle East throughout my career, but I've been pretty much all over the place. You know, I'm a student of history, and I'm starting to see it repeat itself. And Cork's a good friend of mine, and he told me about this channel, and you know, I just thought it was something that needed to be done. People need to be informed about what's going on with our country, because I honestly feel like we're at a, you know, at a point right now where it could tip either way, you know, and I definitely want to see fundamental belief system and you know, the meaning and purpose behind the Constitution reinstated, rebooted, you know, for lack of a better term, because I don't feel like there's anything new with it. I don't feel like anything needs to be changed, and I'm a firm believer that if it's not broke, don't fix it. There's nothing wrong with the Constitution, nothing wrong with the amendments. We just have to follow them. Every time we've run into problems in this country, it's been when we try to change those fundamental things that our forefathers were, you know, had the foresight and really just the vision to be able to put down on paper the way that they did. I mean, it's ingenious, and it really is a grand experiment, and it's been proven to work when we follow it. So, you know, the idea of coming up with a channel where we're going to actually talk about all the different amendments and talk about the Constitution itself and what we are doing right now as a country that are taking us away from those documents and where that's going to bring us, you know, and honestly, it's not a good place. So I'm glad to be here, and, you know, I'm a patriot. I want to do my part for this country. And you know, I spent a lot of years fighting for this country overseas. I've lost a lot of blood and a lot of treasure. You know, some very, very good friends of mine will never see the light of day again. And I would hate for it to be all for naught, you know, and even beyond my friends, there's been so many people that have sacrificed for this country over the years since our existence. And we could easily throw it all away. It's a very hard game and very easily lost, and I don't think people realize just how easily we can lose everything that we have right now. So that's why I'm here, and I'm happy to be here. Love Cork, and love talking to him, and you know, he's a great guy, and he's got a lot of insight, a lot of experience. Respect the hell out of him, and I'm glad to be here, and I'm honored to have been asked.
Thanks, Brian. And so what we're going to be talking about today is we're going to be talking about a topic of world politics and world history that a lot of people aren't really aware of, it seems like, especially because you know, you and I have noticed, and we keep on saying that there's nothing new under the sun when it comes to history. And looking at history, I'm seeing that we're running back into a situation where we could be dealing with something just totally unbelievable to our ancestors, even just to our grandparents and parents, the idea that we could actually become a communist state, just like the former Soviet Union, and that it'll either come in violently, which it seems like it's going to be, or it would be crazily that it would be actually voted in. Much in the same way that socialist governments were voted into countries like South America, such as Brazil, Ecuador, and Venezuela. You know, that was a coup in that area. But these are the kind of people I like to introduce you to, and that's these people right here. And these people are the Mensheviks. So, Brian, you know, tell me about your understanding of what you think about the Mensheviks and their background and who and what they are.
You know, it all comes down to communism, you know, socialism, communism, and there's some little differences between the two, but let's just talk about communism for a minute and where we're currently headed if we're not careful. And you know, you can go back in history and you can see the similarities between the social programs, the annihilation of free thought in this country to a point where people are belittled or you know, they're marginalized when they show any thought outside of the norm. And the norm has become radical. Things that just a couple of years ago were considered far left are now right in the center. People are talking about it as if, you know, literally there are people right now in the entertainment industry, in business even, a Black Lives Matter symbol on their Facebook page, or you know, if they don't demonstrate support for the movement on the left for radical, talking about the good kind of change, and we have plenty of room for good change. I'm talking about radical change to where it almost becomes reverse racism, and you completely take away the desire for anybody to achieve things on their own, based off of their own merits and their own ability. And you stop judging people, as Martin Luther King asked us to do, by the content of their character, and you start judging people simply by the color of their skin. So, for instance, if somebody wanted to get into college, it wouldn't be based off of their college score. It would be based off the color of their skin, whether they got in or not. You know, and some colleges are starting to do that. They're giving major preferential treatment to people and disregarding people based off their own merit. And those are all communist traits that we're starting to take on. And I'll say this last thing is that we're at a point right now, we're at a precipice where if we're not careful, it's going to come to a point where those people that want to achieve are not going to be able to do it. We're going to crush that desire to do anything, because there's not going to be any incentive in it. And it's going to come down to just, you do basically what the state tells you to do, and that's it. And any free thought, any desire to you know, be exceptional is going to be squashed by the state. And that was the same thing that was going on with the Mensheviks.
Now, that's interesting about that with the Mensheviks, Brian, is that a lot of people don't know what Menshevik is. I mean, everybody, or not everybody, a lot of people know about what the Bolsheviks are. You know, with the Bolsheviks, we're talking about basically Bolshevik originates from the word Bolshoi, which is Russian for big or grand. That's why, you know, like the Bolshoi Ballet. But the Bolsheviks were the bigger party, and that was the group that was run by Lenin and Stalin and Trotsky. And these people are very, very interesting, because these are the people that basically turned our world upside down as they came into power, and led to a variety of events around the world for 90 years, basically. And their effect has led to things that are continuing to happen right now, and especially in the United States, which a lot of people are not aware of, in terms of how the Bolshevik revolution has created a scenario of people thinking that we can create a utopian government. And we were talking about the Mensheviks, and the Mensheviks were the elite educated of the late 1800s and the early 1900s, who were creating a socialist government in order to basically just take over from the Tsar. I mean, there was an interim government. They wanted to take over and create, quote, a pseudo-democracy. It's interesting, or a democratic republic. They never really got to the point of being a democratic republic, but they continued to be an attempt at social democracy, or being a democratic socialist government. And the problem with that is that they're in total contrast to each other. And what it does is it relies on the backgrounds of these types of people to come up with these ideas. And just to give you an example of the type of people we're looking at Julius Martov, who was the leader of the Mensheviks, and then also a very famous female, Alexandra Kollontai, who was also in the leadership of the Mensheviks. Now, the key point about this is that they came from a highly educated populace. They were from the upper middle class, and they really had no real life experience, which is interesting because a lot of people don't realize that Lenin also came from a very wealthy upper middle class family. And as you listen to or study their backgrounds, it's really coming down to the point of just power. Who's trying to get into power, and who wants to control that power. But we were talking, Brian and I, remember, Brian, we were talking about just the idea of how naive these people were. And we're going to transition shortly into the American equivalent of that's happening right now. But tell me your observations of this institutionalized higher education mentality that you find occurring in terms of how it's affecting these decisions with government.
Well, let me say this. Let me back up first and just say that, the Bolsheviks, the communists, they were not always our arch enemies. There have been times where we've allied. You can look at World War II. I mean, that's a good example, where my enemy's enemy is my friend. So there have been times within history. I don't want to draw a picture to where they've always been this, horrible villain that lives across the ocean. So understanding the complexity of the type of government that they were trying to set up for its time, you have to understand a few things. For one thing, it's who was involved. And like you said, we're talking about academia here. These were very smart people, but they were representing people that, very simple, very salt of the earth type people were the majority of people in the country. They had a very high illiteracy rate at that time, just like America did. You can look back at America's own history. I believe that Benjamin Franklin was quoted as saying that the best argument against democracy was a 5-minute conversation with the average voter. So, at the time, maybe it made sense, but, we're talking about different times. We have an extremely educated populace in the United States, and even those that we would consider, salt of the earth, they've still got far higher educations than anybody ever did back then. Everybody can read, everybody can write for the most part, and everybody can form their own opinion. We're not at a time where we need to be represented by people that are smarter than us, but nobody sent that memo to academia. So a lot of people in academia seem to think that we do need that. We need the government to think for us. We need the government to make decisions for us because we can't make them on our own. We're not responsible enough to decide whether we should have a gun in our house or whether our kids should go to a private school or a public school or, They should get vouchers. I mean, every single social topic, from food stamps to welfare to college education, all comes down to, is this something that the people in America can decide for themselves how their tax dollars are best spent, or are we just are we back 200 years where the majority of people in this country really can't responsibly make that decision, and we're going to head down a path of destruction if we simply go by the most people that vote for something are majority rules. So there was a time where maybe that type of government made sense, but we're no longer in that time. And like I said, somebody needs to get that message to academia, and that can be easily seen by, I believe, what we're going to talk about next. That you have a lot of people that think they're smarter not only than us, but than our founding fathers, because they want to completely change the way that the Constitution was written.
Well, that's the thing about it, Brian, is that we're in a really bad situation because a lot of people, you're preoccupied with business and making money, and actually I think that's one of the reasons that we've been in the situation we've been for the last 30, 40 years, is if you can distract people by having them focused just on making money and making more money instead of just making enough to enjoy your life and to not have to work so hard, that by doing that you distract people from what's really happening, which is the destruction of the U.S. Constitution and the U.S. government as it was designed by our founding fathers, which was a grand experiment, is a grand experiment, but it relies on the idea that we need to get back to what the origins of the U.S. Constitution is defined as. And actually, this is one of the reasons that we've come up with a new channel. I mean, we're based at Treasure Quest Snake Island, the real story, but this is the new transition over to 1776 Reboot, and that's what you see up there in the top of the. There we go. But that's the reason we have the new logo and 1776 Reboot, and also we have our favorite sayings, which is the Veritas Vos Liberabit and De Oppresso Liber. And it's very interesting that we're in a situation right now that we are actually becoming the oppressed, and oppressed because we've let the government turn into something it was never designed to be, which is it was never designed to be that powerful. It was always supposed to be from the bottom up, as I'd mentioned in a previous episode, defining how the government was reliant on the direction of the citizens, as compared to now, the citizens are at a loss as to make decisions. So we have people who are jumping up, and they're jumping up from sections that I find pretty mind-boggling. And we had looked at Alexandra Kollontai and Julius Martov as the Mensheviks, but we also have something else that's very interesting here in the United States, and that is we have a new Menshevik, and it's the American Mensheviks under the names of Bret Weinstein and Heather Heying. And it's really interesting that these are self-proclaimed leftists, quote, liberals, which I find very interesting. We'll have another episode where we'll talk about the conflict between being a leftist and a liberal, because if you go into the very definition of a liberal, a leftist is the complete opposite of that also. As a matter of fact, if you look at the Founding Fathers were very liberal in the understanding of how Americans should be, which is very free from control by the government. And yet, Bret Weinstein and Heather Heying are creating something called the Unity 2020. And it comes from such a naive point of view, and when they use examples of their life experience about how they've been in other countries, I mean, does that not blow you away, Brian, when you look at the difference between their backgrounds, which basically start in high school, the profession, and goes all the way to university without ever having, according to their bios, ever having any other life experiences other than being professors and having been professional students before then. I mean, what do you think about this? I mean, what does this tell you?
think about it, academia is one of the few professions that you can have where you have zero hands-on education in the topic that you're discussing, and you can still make of that profession. And what I mean by that is you can study art in high school, study art in college, become an art professor in college, and work your way all the way up to the top, the very pinnacle of that profession, and never have been an artist. You know, and of course, I'm just using that as a metaphor for academia as a whole. But the point being, you know, anywhere else, can you imagine being a pilot? And you're a pilot, Cork. Can you imagine some guy coming in to be your co-pilot, and you ask him, you know, do you have any experience flying? And he's like, well, you know, I played on the internet, you know, but I've never actually been in an aircraft. I've never flown an aircraft.
Or that I've stayed in a Hilton, really, or what's the commercial that goes around? It's like the surgeon. Holiday Inn Express. Yeah, we are now the generation of the Holiday Inn Express, where our decisions are based on that.
You know, you said something else earlier too that really kind of struck a nerve with me, and that's about when it comes to people like this. You know, I think that a lot of people are selling themselves out. You were talking about money, you know, and how money basically placates the population, you know, and that is so true. And you can look at the welfare system today, and you can just look at the talking points that the Democrats have, all the social programs that they want to provide. All those things are meant to placate a portion of our society that keeps them in power. And as long as they can, you know, give enough, you know, what was it back in the day? It was bread
and circuses.
You know, whatever they would give. That's it, bread and circuses, right? So you got the Romans with the great amphitheaters and where they're, you know, fighting tigers and lions and stuff in the middle, gladiators. All that stuff was just to keep the population happy. That's it. Keep the masses happy. Keep them drunk and happy, and they're not going to ever revolt on you. And that's why they lasted 1,000 years. We're in the same situation right now with the Democratic Party has become that party where it's not about doing the right thing. It's about doing the right thing to keep your job. And they will sell their souls to keep their jobs. You know, and they'll go against what is in the best interests of their constituents. And that's the sad thing. And there are a few people that have woke up on the left and have joined people on the right to say, hey, hold up. I can think for myself. I don't need government handouts. I don't need you to you know, give me anything. I can earn. I'm just as smart as you. I'm just as strong as you. I can do everything that you can do. I don't need you to give me anything. I don't need an advantage. I don't want one. I don't want us to get to a place where I'm above you and you're looking at me saying, yeah, you're only there because of A, B, or C. I want you to look at me and go, this guy was better than me. That's why he's there. At that moment in time, he was better than me. That's why he got the job and I didn't. And if there's any doubt in anybody's mind about that, either it's propaganda or it's the truth, and it's because of these programs that are basically giving things to people instead of giving them the incentive to prove that they can do it without being given anything. And the gifts are not out of empathy. It's not because the people on the left in power really care about the people that are below them, their constituents. It's because they want to keep their jobs. And you can prove that by just looking at how long some of these Democrats have been
that's one of the things we got going on
Nancy
right now.
Pelosi,
is we got an issue with the understanding of service, such as in politics and the military, and how it's in conflict with greed and how much money under capitalism, where capitalism takes over from the government. And one of the issues I'm finding right now is we're also having a major disconnect from people who have reality. I mean, if you look at it on a microscopic level, on a very small level, it's as simple as the fact as children don't even know where a chicken's, piece of fried chicken comes from, where they think it comes from a cellophane expectorating machine where it just shoots out and then their mother just picks it up and brings it home and fries it up, not realizing that a chicken was raised, lived a life, and was killed, was blood all over the place. And you're going to benefit from that chicken and its life being taken. So now we have situations where, like we were talking about with Mensheviks, where we got all these Mensheviks in this country now who have no understanding of reality, which is really interesting because it's like when we talk about, somebody like, here we go with Heather Heying and Bret Weinstein. These are biologists. These are people who should understand the life and death cycle. And yet, I'm just blown away in the manner in which Bret Weinstein, and just was it 2 weeks ago, is just amazed that people are not jumping on the bandwagon with the idea that they can come up with Unity 2020. They've even had was it Congressman Dan Crenshaw from Texas, which I find very interesting, where it's just like. They had him on his conversation, but it's just like, it's just, I'm seeing more and more of politicians. I'm just seeing more and more of situations where we've got these, politicians who are just basically just, they're playing lip service because they're getting paid, and all they got to do is just keep the machine running, but the machine isn't doing anything. And what it's also doing is burning fuel, and so here we got this situation where we've got these, what do we call them? The education elite, the higher education elite, who think that because they can come up with the idea and everybody should just jump on, let's just jump on the bandwagon and let's make something different, not understanding why there are actually evil people. And it's like, let's talk about evil people. And why these people should be very aware of what these evil people are. So, Brian, let me hear some of the stories that about how your experiences in dealing with very bad people, and I'll share some of mine.
Yeah, look, I spent an entire career fighting either with people that were being oppressed or against people that were oppressing. And I've seen, some pretty horrible things in my time that have led me to believe that the average American really doesn't understand what it means to be in need. And I don't say that to be harsh or to marginalize anybody's situation. I get it. There are definitely anomalies, and there are definitely people that are in need. There are kids that go without food. There are terrible things that happen in this country. But I'm talking about overall, big picture wise, people don't understand what they're getting themselves into. And when I see these riots, and I see these anarchists, and I see these people from Antifa, and not only Antifas, but you also have to look at the Black Lives Matter. And the reason I say that is because a lot of people in that movement support what's going on the fringes of that side of the argument. And very often, just the fact that they're together fuels the people that are doing the worst things. And what they're doing is that they're putting us on a glide path to being in a situation where evil men and evil people can do evil things, and there's not going to be anybody that's going to be able to stop them. And academia is famous for not understanding that until it happens.
Yep.
You can look throughout history and you can see how often it's happened in history to where people don't understand what savageness the human psyche is capable of until they've witnessed war. And civil war is the worst, because civil war is even worse than an invasion from, people from one side of the world coming over to another side. That's horrible too. And, but when it's combatant against combatant, that's one thing. But I can't tell you how many times I've seen innocent civilians, and I mean innocent. I'm not talking about even somebody that was, giving aid to the enemy. I mean, these were just people that just wanted to farm. That's it. Just have no political understanding even. I mean, I've been in places in Afghanistan where the people that were there didn't even understand what it meant to. I asked one guy if he knew who, at the time it was Karzai. I said, "Do you know who the president of Afghanistan is?" And they swore that he was there in their village, and they brought out the village elder, you know, and then they're like, that's the president of Afghanistan, because that's all they knew was that little world. These guys are still living in a biblical time, basically. They have nothing. They have no power, no electricity, no media, no nothing. They just live their life, and sometimes they get caught in the middle of a war, and the next thing you know, and you're creating, a lot of times when those things happen, you're perpetuating the next generation of combatants, because somebody gets their, I mean, who knows how many kids are out there that got my name on their lipstick list because, dad got killed 10 years ago, so, I mean, you got to be careful about the secondary and tertiary effects of combat, and they happen so easily when you lose sight of that. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because we're on in the military, we call it a mission creep, right? So what that means is that you're in one place, and then slowly, before you know it, you're in another. And I used to think that that's where we were headed, that one day we were just going to wake up and we're going to be in a communist nation or in a socialist nation. But I feel like right now, a capitalist free society, we're shifting towards socialism. It was going slow, but right after, the perfect storm, I call it, because you have the coronavirus, you have this social change movement that started. People don't have jobs. They don't have anywhere to be other than, putting all their time and energy into those things. You've got the internet is at a point now where it can reach everybody just about in this country. And you can have flash mobs just about anywhere you want. There's all these types of things. Plus you have these anarchists that are they're taking advantage of the freedoms that we do have in this country to better their cause, better serve their cause. So we're at a point now where it's not going to be a mission creep. If we're not careful, we literally are going to just vote out the last of the people that think that, that believe in freedom, and we're going to put in this elite class of basically people that have no life experience, and they're strictly from academia, and they're going to be the ones that are making all the calls on what should be and what shouldn't be based off of what, and these guys are a great example that you brought up, because they want to completely change. They basically wrote their own constitution. They don't want to do things based off of our constitution. They want to do things based off of this document that they wrote. So they just want to put it aside like it doesn't work anymore. And that's not the case. It's not broke.
Exactly. And one of the big problems that we have right now is we haven't been following that Constitution for about 120 years. I mean, most definitely since the creation of the Federal Reserve. And that's actually one of the issues I'm very concerned about right now, is because with the Federal Reserve, they're trying to print money. And by printing money, just like I've been talking with everybody, it's like just taking like a good bottle of wine and pouring water into that great bottle of wine. And what happens after? You get just a bottle of water. And that's actually what's been happening with our dollar. And they're constantly doing it. They're trying to dig us out of a hole. And when the last time they did that, that happened to be in Germany. And look what happened in Germany. And look how easy it was for a socialist government, which, as Lenin said, the socialism is the doorway for communism. And actually, if you look at what we have in terms of programs, we have socialist governments already within our government. And that's actually where all our spending's coming from. So we have not been following the U.S. Constitution. And actually, that's the reason that, we've created this new channel, 1776 REBOOT, over at YouTube, which you're seeing the facade in the background of. And the reason is because of what we've seen of the U.S. Constitution since as kids, and we thought we were following it, but as we've gotten older and we've been overseas and we've seen what we've done as Americans in other countries that under the U.S. Constitution we are not supposed to be doing, and definitely we're not supposed to be spending any of our hard-earned money to go and spend on other countries who are going to spit in our face or shoot at us when, it's kind of like, that's why I keep on pushing for Eric Prince, because Eric Prince has got a good model. We have professional soldiers, but we also have a home base military, which is specifically designed, and that's the one that will be supported by the taxation of corporations, which is the only entity that is supposed to be taxed under the U.S. Constitution, which is corporations. We, as American citizens, are not supposed to be taxed, and yet we are the ones who are the most taxed. And the reason we're taxed the most is so that we can continue to feed the monster. And the monster has gotten so big now that we've created the pyramid, which even right after World War II was based on the strength of the U.S. citizen, and it was assisted by the U.S. Government, which was very small, and the U.S. corporations benefited from it because they called upon the U.S. citizens to make the body of the corporations in a beneficial way. That's the reason that Eisenhower back in the 50s was even suggesting the idea that the American citizen would have a 3-day work week and that everybody would be able to afford a home. So how many people can afford a home now, and how many people are working much more than a 40-hour week just to make ends meet? So it goes into finances, but also it's going back to the origins of what the U.S. Constitution is, which is it's a playing field. The U.S. Constitution creates a safe place. It's funny because what is it? Bret Weinstein? Bret Weinstein, when he was brought up in front of Congress, one of the questions was asked him, what do you call a safe place? Well, actually, the United States is supposed to be a safe place, not a safe place where you have problems with people, getting on your nerves and making you feel insecure because you have no life experiences and you went straight from high school into university and had no other experiences outside of that. No, it's actually a safe place to be guaranteed life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which is to say that you have the right to not be murdered by somebody or killed by an invader because you're being protected, and that gives you the opportunity for the pursuit of happiness. And, you and I have talked about that, Brian. So tell me about that. It's just like you and I have both been in various countries where it is not safe, and you're just lucky enough to stay alive at the same time trying to just feed yourself.
Yeah, so we've talked about this, and I think we've agreed to disagree on a couple of small topics, but we mostly agree. My big thing is this, the way I read it, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. When it comes to life, for instance, I take that as I have the right to protect my life and that of my loved ones. When I think of liberty, I think of the ability to basically, as long as I'm not harming anybody else, that I can do what I want to do in my life. I can be what I want to be. I can marry who I want to marry. I can, have kids, not have kids, be whatever job I want to be. I can do whatever I want to do as long as I can meet the standards for whatever it is I'm trying to do, that I can do it and nobody's going to step in. So if you look at the way that the Constitution was written, it was a very small government at the time. And like you said, and think about this, how did we get here in the first place? Does taxation without representation bring a bill? It should, yet I'm thinking that if we were where we are right now, as far as the amount of taxes that the average American pays, back in 1776, we'd have a lot of problems. Or I don't know the exact date of the Boston Tea Party. I'd have to look it up.
I don't remember exactly.
Maybe you can tell me that. I'm not, like I said, I'm a student of history, not a teacher. But the bottom line is that, we're taxed up the wazoo for things that have nothing to do with our own lives. They have absolutely nothing to do. I live in a very rural place. I live out in the country in the middle of nowhere. My life has nothing to do at all with what's going on in the inner city in the state that I live in, and yet I pay all kinds of taxes for that city, all kinds of taxes. And then my federal dollars go for paying for things that I could care less about. But they're still going to it for whatever reason, because it was, fat on a bill that got passed and it never got trimmed off, or because somebody feels like, the secondary effects of that money are going to somehow help keep us secure. That money's either going overseas. Hell, we paid the Red Chinese billions of dollars. I'm totally pulling that number out of my
$7 million for the COVID.
But I know we paid them a lot of money for Wuhan. Yeah. These are our enemies, supposedly. it doesn't make any sense to me. The fact that our tax dollars are just going for all kinds of things that have nothing to do with us being here and with the promises that were given to us within the Constitution. Most, if not all, of the personal taxes, I'd say all of the personal taxes, and a lot of the industrial taxes are things that have been added on in that mission creep towards socialism to include Social Security. Those are all things that were added on later. And that is not, if I gave you a manual and I said, here, follow every step in this manual and you will be able to build this widget. If you changed 90% of the things in the manual without even thinking about what effects it was going to have on the next step, do you really think you're going to have that same widget that I said, that promise? I promised you a widget, but I promised it to you only if you followed the directions. If you change the directions, you can't expect the same widget.
Yeah.
That's the United States right now. We're expecting to be here and be able to pursue life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, but we've completely changed the Constitution to a point where we're becoming something that has nothing to do with any of those three things, those three terms, and yet we're expecting the outcome to be the same as if we had never touched the Constitution or the amendments as they stand.
Well, that's the thing about it. It's just like, we're in a situation where we've lost our way so far from the U.S. Constitution and what it's defined as, and that's one of the things. It just blows me away because I was like, watching the interview with, or actually their broadcast at over at the Dark Horse podcast, and they're Bret Weinstein brings up the Second Amendment and the idea that his exact words is that people do not have imagination. I mean, how many times have you heard that wording with imagination, where you see that it has nothing to do with imagination? What matters is what we see. What is it, that we see from human behavior, that there's a reason of why our founding fathers wrote the document in a variety of ways in terms of just what they were defining, but also how they defined it. To make a document that is very clear and it's very simple, and it was written simply. We talked about in terms of they had the prior background of having gone through the legal system in the United Kingdom, and how that was so against the common citizen because you needed a barrister in order to explain everything to you. It's kind of like religion. That was when they made the big transition, was when the common person could read the Bible. It's the same thing with our legal system, as now we're getting into a point, and I can talk, for days about what happened with Discovery Channel in terms of I was in a situation where I was defending my First Amendment rights, and I needed a lawyer in order to do that when it should have been already clear and defined in the U.S. Constitution. And yet, here we are after 3 years of doing this, and going through a 3-year lawsuit with Discovery Corporation, defending my rights that are clearly defined in the U.S. Constitution. And yet, we are now becoming like the United Kingdom, or worse, as we get closer and closer to the idea that people could actually vote in a Soviet-style government that would dictate to the people because they're somehow helping or defending or creating safety. And I mean, you remember what Benjamin Franklin said about safety, trading, the illusion of safety, trading your liberty for the illusions of safety, and then you have neither safety nor liberty. And that's where we are running right down towards. And it's because of, quote, as Bret Weinstein says, it's the lack of imagination of people. So the idealism, I mean, this is what we call like the sheep that are easily preyed upon by the wolves. I mean, you've seen wolves. I've seen wolves. And what do they do to these villages when they come into them?
Yeah, no, there's no doubt about it. There are animals out there. Okay, there are people that are not even, I don't even consider them human beings. there have been horrible things that happen when we allow people to not be able to defend themselves, people to not be able to have any power or say in what the government does. What you end up having is a government that's all powerful, and power corrupts. It always has, and it always will. I can tell you an experience that I saw overseas. I didn't see this firsthand. I knew that it happened in this village that we were working with. The Taliban had come in, and it was a girls' school, and they took off the hands of all the girls in that school, and the teachers too, and they left them in a pile. You know, and then they executed everybody. And there's just and that was just it was a message. It was a message for that province to not allow women to become educated. You know, and this was earlier on in the war, when they had a little bit more influence than they do today. Not to say it's not going back to where they have a lot of influence, but there was a time where they had great influence, and we did not. You know, the shifted at one point, starting to shift back. I'll leave that for another story. But what I was going to say was that, you know, when you start looking at power, you know, you really have to be careful about putting constraints in place so that power does not become handed from one generation to another, or from one class to another. You don't want there ever to be a situation where only one class is afforded the power, or only one class is afforded, a place in government. Those are things that happen with communism, socialism. I mean, at their base, they're not horrible things. I could show you examples in, for instance, Israel, on a kibbutz I've been to, where I've seen that ideal of everybody participating, everybody gives what they can, you know, and it's almost like a commune. You know, that's where the name comes from, right? So everybody gives and everybody takes as needed, and no more. And it's easy to control when you got 100 people, 200 people. But when you have almost, you know, 366, 400 million people in a country, you can't control it like that. And what it ends up happening is that elite class is going to do everything they can to stay in power. And we're already seeing it now. You can see it with our own politicians.
Well, not only that, but you also saw what was happening in terms of just in the presidencies from the Bushes and the Clintons. I mean, they were basically trying to do a dynasty. They were trying to create dynasties. When you start seeing, you know, one president and then his offspring or her offspring becomes the next president, those are dynasties. You're creating dynasties. That's against the country. Yeah.
I saw it the other day. I saw one of the Clintons, their daughter, is looking to get into politics. You know, I can see them push her to the top. I see all the time Trump's son, I can't remember his name, but you know, he's on TV all the time, and you know, I got that little twitch in the back of my head that's telling me that there's going to come a point where he's going to run for president or something like that. You know, he's either going to go for Congress or for Senate, or I just see it happening. And he's got the platform now because, you know, his dad's in power, so he has almost an open platform to sell himself to the American people. And it's scary only from the sense that, you know, I'm not, don't get me wrong, there are things that I agree with the present administration. There are things that I totally disagree with. But that's not the conversation.
Exactly.
The conversation is about power and how much of it should we give. And we really have to be careful because the Constitution was very specific, and yet I hear things like, hey, we should go for a third term limit or a fourth term limit. And the even scarier thing for things that are coming up close is I've heard politicians, I've heard Hillary Clinton herself say that Vice President Biden, if he is to lose the popular vote, or if he's to lose the election, that he should under no circumstances
that's insane.
concede.
Yeah.
Under no circumstances. Meaning, basically, that he should not say that he lost until they count enough votes
Correct.
from people that voted from home
Correct.
to where he won. And if it goes up to the 20th of January, that they would use the Constitution, they would weaponize the Constitution. And what I mean by weaponize is, guess who becomes president until a president is determined?
Yeah.
Nancy Pelosi.
Yeah.
Do I need to say anymore?
That's just crazy. I mean, it's just, people just have no idea what's happening. And that's why we've come up with this new channel. And I'd like to take this moment because we're going to make sure we stay under the hour as we have been attempting to do, but we have these long ones that keep on going. But I'd like to be sure that everybody goes over to YouTube and go check out the new channel. There will also be a link off of the original Treasure Quest Snake Island, The Real Story. Also, this is off of Facebook, my two presences on Facebook. And please go over to YouTube and subscribe at 1776 Reboot. And that is the title of the channel. That also you'll recognize the logo and everything that we have on here. So please go over to YouTube, and we'll also ask that you make comments, because more comments are good. And next episode of any questions, we will answer them. So I'm hoping that you'll ask some good questions, because we would love to go and find out the answers to those questions, because that's one of the great things about that, is that when you can get in there and have somebody go out and find answers to questions that you may not have access to the source that we could get some good stuff from, we will go and find them for you. So if you would, please go over to YouTube right now and subscribe at the 1776 Reboot channel. You'll recognize the logo with my GCT magazine 1776 and Brian's crossed arrows from the Special Forces insignia, and you will also recognize the logo of 1776 Reboot, and that will be available over there, and we'll give you a quick look at what that looks like. And so here we've got this and this, and so you'll see this is what the page looks like over there. You'll see the Veritas Vos Liberabit and the De Oppresso Liber. What's that, Brian?
Let me get a quick. Can I give a quick
Yeah,
go
for
talk
it.
about my book for 1 second? Yeah, sorry I didn't bring it up in the intro. I'm not a big bloviator, but I do have a book. It's my fourth book, actually. If you want to look me up, there's books out there. None of them are, about great feats of bravery or anything like that. All right, so if that's what you're looking for.
And what's the title of the book?
I don't write like that. I do write about common sense things that you can do to keep yourself safe in an unsafe world. My book is called, the current series I'm working on is called the Green Beret Pocket Guide series. I've got the Green Beret Pocket Guide that's already out, and I have the Green Beret Survival Guide that's already out. And that's the one, if you go to my website, it is knuckledraggersurvival.com, www.knuckledraggersurvival.com. You can find out about me, my book, how to get it, all that kind of stuff. It's a good book. It'll teach you how to keep safe in an unsafe world, right? All the things you need to do, terrorism awareness, personal security, personal protection. Check it out.
And we'll have all the links available at the YouTube channel under each episode, so you'll be able to just do the drop-down arrow. Or I'll also pin in the comments, I will pin the links to Brian's book over at Amazon, and actually his books, plural, over at Amazon. Also my books over at Amazon, also to the knuckledraggersurvival.com website, and also my corkgraham.com, and also the GCT magazine link for you. But today we'll close out at 54 minutes and 38 seconds. And based on technical ability, based on Brian traveling tomorrow, we'll see if we can start with the First Amendment. So we will be talking about the First Amendment and looking at it from the contemporary lens of what's happening in this country, what's happening in this world, and looking at how we can best bring back the U.S. Constitution in the manner that it was intentionally written, which there is nothing old about the U.S. Constitution. The question is whether we're going to follow it and follow it accurately and correctly in the manner that it was written. So I want to thank you, Brian, for being on the show today, and hopefully we'll be able to bring in tomorrow. If not, then we'll shoot for Wednesday.
Thanks for having me, Cork.